Nick speaking, and welcome to this video. Right, today I want to talk about the Necron Canoptek Harvest Formation, run over the individual units, how we're going to use each individual units, the best way to take the individual units, run over how the formation works as a whole and together, and just give you just a general lowdown on this formation. Now, I know it's a very popular formation. It's almost an auto-include for many, including myself. But you know, I think there's a lot more to the formation that maybe meets the eye, and that's what I want to try and put across here in the video. Hopefully, you'll get some tips from it. Hopefully, it's useful to someone. Okay, so let's go over the formation. So what you see in front of you is the minimum requirement for the formation. So effectively you have to take 1 unit of Wraiths, which is the minimum of 3, 1 unit of Scarab Swarms, which is a minimum of 3, and 1 Tomb Spider. So you have to take 1 Tomb Spider. So that's not a unit, you just can only take 1. So that's our minimum requirement. Now the benefits that we receive is the formation itself receives move through cover and relentless. Now obviously the spider is a monstrous creature that has moved through cover anyway, and the wraiths are beasts, so they ignore terrain, and of course the scarabs are beasts, so they ignore terrain as well in the movement. So that's a pretty useless feature as such, but you do receive relentless. Now that can be quite useful. Basically it means you can move and shoot and assault at the same time with a heavy weapon. Now the main benefit of that is going to be on the wraiths. So if you wanted to give these wraiths the heavy beamer weapon, then you can still move and shoot that weapon. Now that's useful. Whether you're going to do that or not, we'll talk about that a bit later when we look at the individual Wraith units. So that's some of the benefits. But the key thing is the Canoptek Spider himself. At the beginning of your turn, he's able to choose 3 things. He's able to choose either Fleet, Reanimation Protocols, or Shred. And then anyone within 12 inches of him gains whichever special rule he chooses to select. Now that's pretty useful, and arguably, not arguably, you know, that is why the formation is pretty decent, because what you're going to be choosing is you're going to be choosing Reanimation Protocol, which gives you your 5+ RP roll. Now 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to see this formation, and you're going to be taking this formation within the Reclamation Legion, which gives you the +1 to that RP roll. So you're going to gain a 4+ RP roll. That is pretty sweet. Now you can take Fleet, and you can take Shred. Fleet probably isn't one you're ever going to take. Shred maybe, particularly if you need to get those Scarab Swarms wounding something. And you might take Shred, I suppose, on the Wraiths if you're going up against a high toughness creature. But I suppose ultimately, really, you're going to be looking to get RP. Certainly, when you're in range of that spider at the beginning of the game, RP is going to be a pretty key thing to have. So those are your benefits. What I want to do is I want to run through each individual unit, and as I said, see how we're going to use them, etc. So I think we'll start with the spider himself. So let's just move these out of the way. So the spider himself, I said you can only take 1, which is a bit of a shame because it does take out the Scarab farm function of the Reclamation Legion. It's still doable, but you know, it was quite nice having your multiple Tomb Spiders and then just beefing up your Scarab units. Well, you can't really do that now. However, you still can generate 1 Scarab a turn on whatever units of Scarabs that you take. Now, additional war gear for this guy. The Gloom Prism is our only anti-psychic defense. 10 points. It's reasonable. The only issue that you have is obviously this guy is key to the formation in terms of getting the RP up for the units. So this is going to be a high priority target from your enemy. And once again, putting on, say, one of the guns, although it's not a bad choice, you know, there's no doubt at all that your enemy is going to be looking to take down this guy pretty quickly. So I would actually suggest probably no upgrades, unless you've got a last 10-minute points that you can't put anywhere else. The Gloom Prism could help, but personally I try to keep him as cheapest as possible, which is 50 points. Now, as I said, your enemy is going to be looking to target this guy, so ideally you want to try and hide him if you can, behind a piece of terrain, maybe behind a monolith if you have one. You want to just keep him out of line of sight as best as possible, but obviously within 12 inches of the rest of the harvest, so you can put that RP on them. Now, incidentally, if you have two formations, the spiders can't transfer their power to like another formation. So this guy here can only give it to this formation, and then once he is dead, he can't then put it. You know, another spider from another formation can't put it onto these. So just a side note on that. Okay, so yeah, try and keep him out of sight. Now, we know he's going to go down, and we know your enemy is going to try and take him down. And to be fair, that's great, because you know it gives us a little bit of power on the table. And if your enemy's going to be shooting at this guy, then he's not going to be shooting at anything else. And even if he goes down, yes, okay, you're taking RP away from the formation, and yes, okay, you can't generate any more Scarabs. But to be fair, that is not actually that painful for us, because even without RP, and particularly the Wraiths, they're awesome. And we're going to talk about the Wraiths at the end. I'm going to go over the Scarabs in a minute. So it's not actually that much of a downer if you do lose the Tomb Spider. But from your opponent's point of view, he's going to be really happy that he's got rid of that Tomb Spider. But what I want you to do is I want you to look at it positively. So, you know, okay, the Tomb Spider's down, but the formation, you know, the Wraiths, the Scarabs are still going to be able to function very well. And your opponent's just put all that firepower into taking down the Tomb Spider, so he's not been shooting at your scoring units, your warriors, etc. So try and look at it positively. Okay, so we'll come to how we're going to use the spider in a minute. I think I'll look at the individual units first. So that's the spider. Let's look at the Scarab Swarms. Now the Scarab Swarms, as I said, the minimum requirement is 3. But you can take another 6 if you want to. You can have a unit of 9. Now, it depends what you want to do with the Scarabs. And it depends obviously how many points you want to invest. Now, a unit of 9 plus whatever you're generating from the spider. Now, bearing in mind, it has to be within 6 inches of the unit. So as soon as the Scarabs commit to assaulting, etc., your enemy, they're going to be out of range more than likely. So that's just something to bear in mind. But yeah, if you want to be aggressive with the Scarabs, then taking the bigger unit certainly can work. And having that entropic strike rule where you can glance anything on a 6 is pretty decent. Now, it's fair to say that the Scarab Swarms, in my opinion, aren't quite as good as they were. And points wise, going up to 20 points a mini is quite a reasonable amount. Now, I did start off my formation using bigger squads of Scarabs because I was just playing at old school. But to be fair, I think in the current edition, with the current rule set, I think smaller squads of Scarabs is the way to go. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with having a unit of 3 Scarabs in this formation. If you can pop on a couple more, if you have the points to spare, that would work quite nicely. But to be fair, 3 is pretty decent. Because at the beginning of the game, hopefully you're going to have the spider protected with cover, or at least having, don't forget you're going to be having RP on this guy. So assuming you can get first turn, which I want to talk about later, because you are going to need first turn to get your RP up. But as soon as you've got your RP up, you're going to have a potential cover save, you're going to have potential 3+ armor save, and then you're going to have your 4+ RP roll. So he is fairly survivable, at least in cover, and obviously totally hidden, really survivable. So you'd imagine that you're going to have him around potentially for the first 1 or 2 turns, at least until your opponent's deep strikers come in, because they may come in and target him. So let's look on the bright side and say you're going to have at least 2 rounds of generating. That gives you a unit of 5 Scarabs, and 5 Scarabs obviously isn't going to set the world alight, but it's still quite reasonable. Now, I would suggest that you have 2 ways of using this little grouplet of minis. I tend to use them more defensively, to be fair. Eventually, the Wraiths are going to be going out on their own without the spider. You do have the option, of course, of just like being a bit ballsy and maybe moving and running the spider, trying to keep up with the Wraiths, assuming your enemy isn't going to take down the spider. But to be fair, as soon as you do that, you know, your spider is very, very vulnerable. I prefer to hold the spider back, let the Wraiths do their own business, which we'll talk about in a minute, and then use this little unit here together. Try and generate as many Scarab swarms as you can during the game. And this little blob here has a great multitask potential. One, you can hold them back and try and hold objectives. Yes, obviously they're not objective secure, but at least, you know, you can take objectives. So that's great. Don't forget, these are 3 wounds each. Yeah, okay, they're toughness 3. They've got a rubbish save. You know, they can be they're vulnerable to blast. They could be instant death. But 3 wounds each is still quite reasonable, especially if you're in terrain, especially if you have a 4+ RP roll, which hopefully, thanks to this guy being alive, you're going to get. So you can be quite defensive with him and get objectives. You can be quite defensive with them and use them as a little counter assault unit. So when you've got your warriors at the back, your immortals at the back, and if your enemy comes in, you've got a potential counter unit for oncoming enemy, even just to slow them down 1 turn, maybe to hold them up in close combat for a couple of turns. You know, you're not going to set the world alight with these guys and just rip through things, but you know, they can be quite good for holding up a couple of units, or a unit, which is approaching you, to bogging them down. They are fearless, so that's great, because you know, even if you lose a big blob of them and you've just got 1 Scarab swarm left with 1 wound, you know, he's fearless. He's going to stay locked in combat. He's going to hold your enemy down for 1 unit, for 1 turn. Sorry. Especially if you can do that in your turn. And then yes, in your enemy's turn they're going to wipe the unit out, they're going to consolidate, but now you're left with your enemy in close range. Your warriors are there ready to rapid fire them to death. So that certainly gives you the option. Bearing in mind, don't forget, if you are using the Reclamation Legion, your warriors will have Relentless, so you can rapid fire and assault. That's great right there. That gives you that extra attack on the charge. As well as being able to rapid fire if you so wish. Now the Scarabs and the Spider, as I said, just work together, you know, with the RP roll at the end, generating the Scarabs. And okay, if you'd mould a 1, which I always do, you do potentially take a wound, but don't forget you can use your RP roll to negate that wound. So all in all, great little units. As I said, you can be aggressive with them. You can send out the Wraiths and the Scarabs together and just like go all out aggressiveness. But personally, from my experience, these 2 units here work much better defensively and just sort of staying back, doing what they need to do with the Wraiths at the beginning, and then, as I said, switching roles. Okay, so let's go on to the Wraiths, because this formation is all about the Wraiths, about the Wraiths. All about the Wraiths, about the Wraiths. Yeah, stop that, Nick. Okay, so let's have a look at the Wraiths. So, minimum requirement is 3, and we can take up to 6 Wraiths. Now, 3 Wraiths do work pretty well, and if you want to keep the points down, then having 3 Wraiths, fine, no problem at all. But the main issue with having small units of Wraiths is that they can easily get locked in close combat for a good number of turns, because you don't have the killing power. Now, I just want to quickly run over the Wraiths. So what's good about Wraiths? Why is it all about the Wraiths? Okay, so let's quickly look at the stats that make these guys awesome. So they have 2 wounds. Their toughness 5. They have a 3+ invulnerable save. They have whip coils. You're going to be taking whip coils. That's the main upgrade. So they're going to put whip coils on them, which makes them initiative 5. They are beasts, so they ignore terrain, even on the charge. And they're rending. They're fearless. They're awesome. They are awesome. Now, having said that, oh, they're strength 6 as well, by the way. Now, having said that, they're not infallible. I don't want you to look at this unit as a Death Star unit, a unit which is just going to survive the whole game, a unit which is going to kill everything. It can happen, but I don't want you to look at the unit in that way. I want you to look at this unit differently. Look at this unit as a huge distraction unit. Something which is going to distract your enemy to shoot at them. Now, if they get shot at, they can go down. You know, even a 3+ save with 2 wounds, even if you manage to get regeneration on them, so you can RP on them, so you can have a 4+ save, a 3+ save, a 4+ save. You know, one day in one game, you can roll 1s and 2s quite happily, and you can use the unit. So it's going back to my 6th edition tactics with these guys. You know, don't worry about that. Even if they go down, you know, they've still done well, because they're going to take a huge amount of shooting to take them down. But if you get unlucky, you just look at it that, you know, it took a good amount of shooting to take them down. Now, on the flip side of that, in terms of close combat, then even if you do get them into close combat, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're just going to wipe out your enemy. Because even strength 6, even rending. I mean, strength 6 is good. Yes, you wound most stuff on 2s. And yeah, initiative 5, most of the time you're going to be going first. It's the rending really that does the damage with these guys. Because if you're going up, say, Space Marines, they're going to get their 3+ save. But against the rending wounds, that is what's the killer. Now, unless you get a good round of rending, you're probably going to be tied in combat with that fearless rule. And that's why I like to take a slightly bigger units of these, because 3 Wraiths, I mean, unless you particularly want to hold up a unit, which is not a bad tactic, but 3 Wraiths by themselves, you're probably going to take a good few turns to kill something. Now, I've had 6 Wraiths up against 10 Marines, you know, and 2 rounds of combat, they basically did nothing. I got no 6s. The 3rd round of combat, I got like 5 6s, killed the unit out, and that's how Wraiths work. Sometimes you can roll really well, sometimes, you know, they just don't do much damage. And that's you need to bear that in mind. You know, they're not a huge killing power unit, and although yes, you know, on paper, and they should be very survivable, they're not always going to survive, you know, every single round of shooting. You know, some rounds of shooting, you're going to get unlucky and they're going to go down. Okay, so the upgrades, as I've said previously, whip coils is your main upgrades. Yes, you do have the option to take the gun, which is the heavy gun, and then use the benefits of the harvest to let you move and shoot that gun. It's an option. It puts more points into the Wraiths, and to be fair, I personally just don't think you need it. You don't need guns on Wraiths. You've got guns within the formation. Sorry, not the formation. Within your army, you know, lots of great guns. So I just don't see the need for guns really. Keep them assault based. Keep your opponent occupied with what they can achieve in the assault. So don't worry about really taking the options unless you're that way inclined. I mean, if you said, well, I always take the gun, you know, the gun's fantastic, you know, you can move and shoot it and you can assault as well. Great, good on you. You know, if that's how you play it, that is definitely not the wrong way to play it. It's just not how I personally play it. Okay, so the spider is obviously pretty vital for these guys. giving them the 4+ RP roll within the Legion. If you don't take them within the Legion, the Decorium, sorry, if you don't take them in Decorium, you know, it's a 5+ save. But even with a 3+ invulnerable and then a 5+ RP, it's pretty decent. But you know, let's face it. I mean, unless you're ultra aggressive with your single Tomb Spider, which is very vulnerable to being killed, then apart from that, the beginning of the game, you're not going to have your RP on these. The first couple of turns, you're going to have it, and you're going to be trying to get first turn, because if you don't get first turn and your enemy manages to take down the spider, you lose that benefit totally. So you want to get first turn, you want to get RP up as soon as you can, and it will really help these guys survive. But like I said earlier, if that spider does go down, just look at the Wraith unit by itself. Forget the Harvest Formation. Just look at the Wraiths. You know, by themselves, they're just awesome. 3+ invulnerable save, 2 wounds, toughness 5. Very, very survivable without the RP roll. The RP roll is great. It makes them like uber survivable. But it's not essential. So Wraiths, awesome. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much covered. I mean, the Wraiths basically, no, it's not covered at all. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about how we're going to use the Wraiths and their awesomeness. And once again, you would think automatically, what an awesome unit that is. Let me charge out towards my enemy. Let's cause some problems, some distraction, and you're just going to move them out 12 inches. Yeah, that works. I wouldn't necessarily say that's the best way to use them in actual fact. I would say that Wraiths are actually a really great defensive unit as well as an attacking unit. I would say that they are actually quite multi-purpose and multi-rollable. Now, you've probably seen a few of my battle reports, especially when I played, say, Warwick, for example. I used the Wraith very defensively then, because I knew he was coming towards me. So, as opposed to moving straight out 12 inches, I just shuffled a little bit forward, waited for Warwick to make his move. I could see he was coming towards me. So rather than going out to meet him in the middle, I actually went very defensively and I spread my Wraith out in front of my phalanx of warriors to stop him getting into the warriors. Yes, he went into the Wraiths, but I had him in the position where I wanted him. I was able to control his attack. Held him up for a few turns, managed to wipe him out, and then the Wraiths were free to roam. Now, if I'd been a lot more aggressive, the Wraiths would have been straight out, they would have been in the middle of the table, they would have been well away from my spider, enabling me to maintain RP during that couple of rounds of assault that we had in my deployment zone. So you don't necessarily have to be uber aggressive with them, even though they're so awesome. They work just as well as a defensive unit. Especially bearing in mind that most of your Necron army is very vulnerable to assault. I mean, flayed ones and Wraiths are probably your 2 main assault units. Obviously Scarabs, yes, they're in there as well, but Scarabs, you know, slightly different really. So I think that's what makes Wraiths just so great, is they're survivable. On their own, they're survivable. With the RP, like super survivable. And they can be great for defensive work. They can be great for being aggressive. They can be great if you want to put them down the flanks of your force. You know, they can be great working in the central area of the force. You know, they're just all-round great unit. But I would say, you know, still have a plan for them. Wait for your enemy to make their move before you make your move. And of course, you have to adapt basically to what your enemy is doing. Now, having said that, I mean, when I say you have to adapt to what your enemy is doing, it doesn't mean that you change your tactics for your army. As I've always said, you want to play your army, you don't want to play your enemy's army. So your Wraiths will have your roles, you'll have your fixed ideas of what you're going to be doing with them, and that fixed idea will change depending on your opponent's army, depending on how he's playing it, etc. So if your opponent's coming towards you, you might maybe play them slightly more defensively. If your enemy's got if your opponent's a bit more of a gunline army, you may have to take the aggressive stance and maybe charge your Wraiths out, maybe put them down the flank. So that is the actual formation itself. Now personally, I've loved this formation so much that I'm now running 2 formations within my lists. And that works just fantastically. As good old Fritz would say, you know, 1 is none, 2 is 1, and 3 is some. So, you know, 2 formations just gives you the ability to effectively throw one formation away, do whatever you want with it, be aggressive with it, and then you still have another one there waiting in the back lines. Okay, so I think that's it for this video. It's turned out to be quite a long one, but I really hope you enjoyed it. I really hope you got at least something from it. Let me hear your comments below, and hopefully I'll have another Necron tactical video coming up for you soon. Thanks for watching.